In everyday life, most people assume that being poor simply means having less money available to spend. It sounds straightforward, almost mathematical, as if the difference between financial security and financial struggle were just a matter of smaller numbers in a bank account. Yet when economists study real spending patterns across income levels, they repeatedly find something more complex. The cost of everyday life itself becomes higher when financial resources are limited. The paradox is subtle but powerful. Poverty does not only reduce purchasing power, it often increases the price of survival. To understand this dynamic, imagine two households facing the exact same practical need: transportation to work. One household owns a reliable car purchased years earlier with savings. Maintenance is predictable, insurance is manageable, and fuel costs remain the main ongoing expense. The second household cannot afford the upfront purchase, so the family relies on ride services, short-term rentals, or unreliable used vehicles financed with high interest. Over time, the total money spent by the second household can quietly exceed the cost of owning the car outright. The difference is not only financial, but structural. Limited liquidity removes access to the cheaper long-term option. This pattern repeats across almost every category of daily life. Housing provides one of the clearest examples. When someone has sufficient savings and stable credit, they may qualify for lower interest mortgages or long-term leases with predictable costs. But when financial reserves are thin, options narrow quickly. Short-term leases, temporary housing, or frequent moves can introduce fees, deposits, and unstable rent increases. The monthly cost of shelter begins to climb precisely when the household is least able to absorb the increase. The psychological side of this dynamic is equally important. When financial stability is fragile, decision-making often shifts towards short-term survival rather than long-term optimization. Behavioral economists describe this as a scarcity mindset. Under scarcity, the brain becomes highly focused on immediate needs, such as paying this week's bill, covering today's groceries, or avoiding a late payment fee. While this focus is understandable, it also reduces the mental bandwidth available for strategic planning. In practical terms, this means the individual may repeatedly choose the option that solves today's problem, even if it quietly increases next month's expenses. A small loan taken to bridge a temporary gap may solve an immediate emergency, but create a higher repayment burden in the future. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate into a financial environment where each decision becomes slightly more expensive than the one before. The mathematics behind this process is surprisingly simple, but often invisible. Imagine a person who must repeatedly pay a $30 late fee because their payment schedule does not align with their income timing. If this happens just once per month, the annual cost reaches $360. For someone already operating on tight margins, that amount could represent a meaningful percentage of disposable income. Yet the fee does not appear as a single large expense. It arrives in small increments that feel manageable in the moment. Credit systems amplify the effect even further. Individuals with strong credit histories typically access lower interest rates on loans and financing. In contrast, borrowers perceived as higher risk may face significantly higher interest charges. The same refrigerator, the same car repair, or the same medical bill can cost dramatically different amounts depending on the financing terms attached to it. Over time, interest becomes an invisible multiplier applied to everyday necessities. Bulk purchasing introduces another layer to this phenomenon. When a household has spare cash available, it can buy larger quantities of frequently used goods at lower unit prices. Warehouse stores, subscription deliveries, and bulk discounts are all examples of how scale reduces cost. But when income arrives in small increments and savings are limited, buying in bulk becomes impossible. The household buys smaller quantities more frequently, often at higher per-unit prices. The difference may seem small in a single shopping trip, yet over months and years, the cumulative cost grows substantial. Energy consumption shows a similar pattern. Older appliances, poorly insulated housing, and inefficient heating systems often consume more electricity or fuel. Replacing them with efficient models reduces long-term costs, but the upfront investment can be significant. Households without savings remain locked into the higher operating environment simply because the initial upgrade is financially out of reach. Even time itself becomes part of the equation. People with limited financial flexibility often spend more time navigating complex systems to reduce costs, traveling farther for lower prices, waiting in longer queues, coordinating multiple transportation routes, or managing irregular payment schedules. While this effort may reduce certain expenses, it also consumes time that could otherwise be invested in skill development, education, or income-generating activities. Historically, economists have observed versions of this pattern for centuries. In industrial cities of the 19th century, workers without savings often relied on small daily purchases of coal, food, and tools rather than larger weekly supplies. The smaller quantities carried higher prices per unit, reinforcing the cycle of tight margins. The underlying mechanism has not changed, only the specific products and systems have evolved. Modern financial systems, while more sophisticated, still contain many of these structural layers. Subscription services, financing plans, and installment payments can make large purchases appear manageable in the short term, yet they often increase the total amount paid over time. For households with sufficient reserves, avoiding these structures may be straightforward. For others, they become the only available path. When researchers map these patterns mathematically, they often find that the difference between two financial lives is not simply income level, but the cost structure surrounding everyday decisions. One system rewards liquidity and stability with lower long-term prices. The other charges premiums for uncertainty, small transactions, and delayed payments. Understanding this mechanism does not assign blame to individuals navigating it. Instead, it highlights the structural nature of financial environments. Decisions made under scarcity are rarely irrational. They are responses to immediate constraints. The challenge lies in recognizing how those constraints subtly reshape the price of everyday life. Seen through this lens, the phrase "being poor is expensive" becomes less of a metaphor and more of a mathematical observation. When liquidity is limited, the world often shifts from a bulk discount environment into a pay-per-use system, and pay-per-use systems almost always carry higher long-term costs. The deeper insight is not simply that money reduces stress or increases options, although both are true. The deeper insight is that financial thresholds change the structure of choices available in everyday life. Once certain stability points are reached, entire categories of lower-cost options become accessible. Before those thresholds, many of those options remain out of reach. Recognizing this dynamic allows us to view financial systems not only as personal budgeting challenges, but as layered environments where pricing, psychology, and access interact continuously. In that sense, the mathematics of money is rarely just about numbers. It's about how those numbers shape the structure of choices available in everyday life.
The mathematics of money is rarely just about numbers. It shapes the structure of choices we face every day. If you enjoy exploring the hidden systems behind money, economics, and human behavior, consider subscribing. New videos break down the mechanics most people never see.